FQ Live. This is Rose Fausto, also known as the FQ Mom. To those of you who are encountering the term FQ for the first time, it actually means Financial Intelligence Quotient. It's the ninth intelligence that I'm proposing that we teach our children, our loved ones, and even ourselves. So today, we are coming to you live from our live. This is actually our home library. This is the place where my sons did their homework after school, after eating their merienda. And up to now, we still use this for our work. So I hope that you will be joining me every Wednesday at 12:10 up to 12:30. It will be a 20-minute discussion of usually what I wrote about. Like my article for today is entitled Ego Depletion. However, you can probably give me suggestions, you can ask your questions, you can discuss anything else other than my, some other things other than my article for today. So, but for today, I hope some of you or most of you have read the article Ego Depletion, which came out in fqmom.com and philstar.com. So what is ego depletion? So first off, I think what we have to do is to define the way ego is used in this context. It's not the usual colloquial, I am so full of myself, I am so conceited. That's not the way it's being used in this context. It is the psychological sense, which is actually the systematic and the deliberate way of thinking so that we are able to balance our physical desires and our moralistic ideals. So in other words, it is basically rational thinking and foregoing what is good in the short term in order or in favor of what is good in the long term. Sounds very much like saving and investing, huh? Okay, so usually what we think is that it's either you have it, this being rational, being self-disciplined, having a lot of willpower, or we don't. However, that is not the case. It is a reserve. So this willpower draws on a mental reserve, and as in any resource, it is finite. So you can use it up, nauubos, as what we would call it in Tagalog. So I'd like to tell you about an experiment which was done by a couple. His name is Roy, the guy is Roy Baumeister, and the wife is Diane Teese. And this is what they did. So in their experiment room, they baked chocolate chip cookies. So syempre, there's this really yummy aroma. And then, let me use this. They stacked the chocolate chip cookies on one plate. And then, on the other side of the table is a bowl of radish, red and white radish. So this is what they did. They asked their participants to come, and they shouldn't have eaten 3 hours before the experiment because it was supposed to be about taste perception. So for group A, they were just asked to eat the radishes. Can you imagine? You're already smelling the yummy chocolate chip cookies, and in fact, the chocolate chip cookies are also in front of you. And then the other group were asked to eat just the chocolate chip cookies. So it was a one-by-one thing. The experimenter left the participant, went to the other room with a one-way mirror to observe how he would act. So each participant was given something like 5 minutes to eat. And then there was also a control group which was not asked to fast for 3 hours nor given any of these food choices. They also didn't smell the aromatic chocolate chip cookies baking from the oven. So after that, they were asked to do problem solving. And this is what they found out. Those who just ate the radish while smelling and seeing the yummy chocolate chip cookies, they worked at the problem, which was really a difficult problem. It wasn't meant to be solved, for an average of only 8 minutes. So how about the other group? the other two groups, in fact, those who ate the chocolate chip cookies and those in the control group, no food, they averaged 19 minutes at trying to work on the problem solving. So can you see that? What happened was that those who just ate the radish, they already draw from their mental reserve because they had to do self-control. Naubusan na sila ng power para pigilan at they ran out of this power, this mental capacity to go on for a longer period of time in trying to solve the problem. Can you see that? So there's one more thing that I'd like to discuss with you. This is now a study on the judicial rulings on parole. What happened was that they found out that the likelihood of getting a parole was a lot higher right after the last meal of the judges. Can you imagine that? It was a high probability of 65% getting a parole, all the way down to almost 0%. That is going to be the end of the long series before the next break. And then after the break, it will go back to 65% and then going down all the way to 0% again. So you see what's happening. I'm sure these judges try to be rational. They try to just base their decision on what is legal, what is the real situation of each prisoner. But even they are susceptible to this thing called ego depletion. So it's very important, whether you're a judge or a housewife, you're a student or what have you, you should be aware of this notion that it is a reserve. So knowing what we know now, what do? We know that it is a reserve, so we have to be aware of the level of this reserve whenever we make very important decisions. And there are also ways to trick this so-called ego depletion. There was another study which was done, and they found out that when the participants knew that what they were doing was for like a greater good and they had a really great motivation, they sort of extended their time to do that mental activity. So in other words, your reserve somehow replenishes a little bit when there is a good motivation behind it. And they also found out that motivation, when it is external, uses more of this mental reserve. So what do we do knowing that now? When we set our goals and aspirations, we should know what motivates us. And it should be something that we own. So you guys, you better own your goals and dreams and aspirations. Those that you set at the start of 2017. Okay, another tip. This mental capacity, our brain uses glucose. So just a pop of sweet candy probably, or sweet drink, because they found out that if the lemonade was not sweetened, it didn't have the same effect. But if the lemonade was sweetened, it had the same effect of sort of replenishing this reserve. Do you remember when you take this, it would be suggested to you na you should bring candy, so that I'm sure those who just took up the UPCAT, the ASET, and even your regular exams in school. So the next time you are faced with a temptation, just pop out your candy. Alright, and a third tip on how to work around this ego depletion is that to understand that it is like this willpower is like a muscle. So even if it hurts, when you exercise, even if you wear out that muscle, when you do it regularly, you are able to strengthen it. Okay? And it is very much like exercise also. Remember, I'm guilty of this. I'm not really an exercise person. It's really a chore for me to do exercise. And sometimes, ayoko talagang gawin. I really don't want to do it. And sometimes I come up with all sorts of excuses not to do it. But if you just do it, after you've done it, you feel great. you feel great because something happens inside your body, and you also feel good about yourself. So in the same way, if we also try to exercise our willpower, maybe we will strengthen it so that we will now have that that reserve, which is being replenished by exercise. Okay? So, I hope that you've learned something from that. So, wala na yung mga excuses na, tao lang po, I'm not like you naman kasi, I'm not rational all the time. Wala na yon. You just have to be aware about the level of your willpower reserve. So that when you do this, when you decide on big things, big decisions, whether they're big decisions or small but regular decisions, they will all pile up to bring you to where you are now. Okay? So, do we have questions? Oh, yeah. I have a question which was forwarded by Bernie. She asks, I tutor my kids and the sessions sometimes get into my nerves. What do I do to avoid ego depletion? I can really relate with you because I was the tutor of my 3 sons, and that's why I designed a way so that all of us would have upped our willpower reserve already. When they come home from school, we would eat merienda, so syempre that's glucose already, and we would have a better disposition. So I think that's what you can do, Bernie. And what else do we have here? Let me just reset that. Okay. Next question is, what about sacrifice? Always doing sacrifice will deplete our ego or willpower, and we may end up making the wrong decisions. I think the sacrifice here is very much like the third remedy that I discussed, which is the exercise. When you sacrifice, and in fact it's related to even to the first one, and your motivation is for love, you do things for your children, for your spouse, because you love them, and as you do it, you are able to strengthen your willpower, your self-discipline. However, and it's because it's just like exercise, you will have to give yourself time to rest. Okay? Diba, you have to give your muscle time to recuperate. So in the same way, naman todo-todo ang sacrifice. So I think that's all the time that we have. It's not yet? Oh, okay. So we have another room for okay. So there's one that says ego depletion versus saving. I think I mentioned a while ago that it's very much like saving and investing. When you get your bonus, for instance, and you've been wanting to get this gadget for the longest time, so what do? Now you have to be aware that when you go to that shop where you always see that gadget waiting for you, what is your disposition? Are you feeling very low? Galit na galit ka ba? Parang feeling kawawa ka na ba? So you have to be aware of the state of your willpower reserve, because chances are you might succumb to the temptation of making yourself feel good. That is actually the origin of the retail therapy. And that therapy for me is not the best way to do something about feeling depressed, because when you are feeling down and low, as what happened in the experiment, your ability to think long term, your ability to make your willpower, self-discipline, and self-control work is very, very low. So in saving and investing, that is the same case. That's why we also have to help ourselves, knowing what we know now, knowing about all our limitations as human beings. It's better for you probably to just automate your saving and investing. Ego depletion versus new moms. new moms, oh my gosh, you just gave birth. It is probably, you know how I described my labor, and this mom was, may pagka-martyr ako. I didn't know I had the power to do that. I delivered my 3 big sons through Lamas, so there was really no anesthesia. And then, so, you know, ang konti-konti pa lang na nakikita kong very beautiful mothers soon after they deliver their babies. I remember having seen my picture taken right after I delivered. Grabe, it was puffy and everything. And then, of course, you are also, a lot of things are happening inside your body. There's a postpartum depression that's happening. So you have to be aware of that. That is the state where your ego is really depleted. And when I say ego, of course, it's a psychological sense of the word. So what you do is you have to really focus on self-care. You have to, you know, this is what I tell a lot of husbands of pregnant women. When your wife is pregnant and also after she gives birth, kasi sometimes you feel so ugly, diba? The stretch marks and all. You have to make your wife feel that she's still the most beautiful woman in your eyes. So you also, you have to accept that it is a state of being that you're really feeling so down. You're probably very confused, especially for first-time moms, on how to care for your baby. You want to give the world to your baby, but before you do that, you have to take care of yourself first. So read happy books or watch happy shows and eat what you would really want to eat. You know, sometimes you have to watch your weight when you were in the last trimester of your pregnancy. So after giving birth, you have to give yourself treats every so often, pero masyado, so that your size will not go to the next size. But I think that belongs to another topic. So I hope that you've learned something new today. And remember, ego depletion is something that we have to be aware of. Whenever you feel you're down, you have to replenish it. Replenish your reserve so that you will be able to make the right decisions for yourself, for your loved ones, the best for the long term. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to all of you who joined me in this maiden issue of FQ Live. Cheers!